stream is live.
We're
Here we
live.
go. We're live. Hello, everyone. I'm Rose Dioro, and welcome to the Rosemore Roundtable, a limited discussion series hosted by myself and Samantha Brentmore, covering a range of topics specific to the romance audiobook industry. This 9th roundtable discussion centers around crafting a story and writing for audio in the romance industry and beyond, with guests Kayley Loring and C.D. Reiss. Today's discussion is being live streamed on YouTube and moderated by both Samantha and myself. And I'm going to turn it over to Samantha to get us started.
Hi. I'm really excited to have Christine and Kayley here today to dig into all of our curiosities about how you write the books and bring them to audio in the wonderful way that you have. And I'm going to kick us off with some intro questions so that people who don't know you can have a sense of what you've done and the type of work that you do. So I'm going to start with Kayley. 3 questions, and then it's coming to you, Christine. When did you publish your first book? When did you get into audio? Yeah. And what would you say are the hallmarks or key things that someone would associate with your writing?
Okay, I don't have a short answer for this. I apologize. So
we're not here for short answers.
Hallmarks. So I write steamy romantic comedy, and I would say so my very simple genius tagline is funny, sexy, sweet romance, which I hit all those targets in equal measure in all my books, because that's just kind of my author's voice. And I think people expect a lot of banter and heroines who are varying degrees of sassy, and heroes who are good guys, no matter what their personality is. They're all good guys, and they're all the kinds of guys that I've known and liked in my life or would like to know. And then I think my books just make people feel good, and that's really important to me. It's pretty low angst, but I do like to make people cry, just to check in and make sure they're actually paying attention and care about the characters. So that's that. I published my first Kayley Loring book at the end of 2016. And it was one of those things where I just kind of threw spaghetti against the wall. I was still living in LA at the time. I was a screenwriter for 15 years under a different name. And I had come to the end of a career that was super mediocre. I was very, very lucky to last 15 years. None of the scripts I was paid for were ever produced into movies, and I was totally fine with that because I just liked writing dialogue and creating characters. And I just kind of coasted along, going to meetings and being charming, and people would give me money sometimes. And I lasted 3 times longer than most people who have that type of career. So, but I got to a point where I was like, you know what, this is dead. Moving on. So what's next? And I had a friend that I had encouraged to write erotica back in 2012 or something like that, when it was first, self-publishing romance and erotica was kind of a big thing. We call it the gold rush years now. And she did very well. She had no business sense, even less than me. And she made good money. And things had changed by 2016, but I was like, well, I guess this is it. And funnily enough, I hated writing romantic comedies as a screenwriter because they're just the most boring, just kind of puzzle pieces of a screenplay.
Sure.
And so I took an unfinished script of mine called The Vacation, and it was very ensemble-y, and it really should have been a TV show, but I didn't want to write for TV. So anyways, I novelized it, and I added some sex, and at that point I had read maybe 2 self-published contemporary romance novels, and I was like, I got it. And so, I wrote it really quickly, and I published it, and it was at the tail end of 26. It was the tail end of the Gold Rush period, and I didn't know what I was doing. I still got enough downloads and decent reviews, and I was like, okay, I can do this. But I also knew that I couldn't start a whole new career selling books for 99 cents while living in Los Angeles and paying $12,000 for my property tax alone. So I spent the whole rest of the next year transitioning. I live in the Pacific Northwest now, where it's more affordable It was very quiet. And at the end of 2017 was when I started full-time publishing. And again, I I just novelized an unfinished screenplay for my next book too. And it wasn't as good, but my plan, my grand business plan, was I was very lucky because I actually made a nice nest egg when I sold my house in LA. And so I wasn't like desperate to, publish a whole bunch of books and make money. And I sort of was like, well, I'm just going to write what I want to write, and I'm going to publish these books every couple of months, and I'm going to figure shit out as I go. And I planned by my 10th book, I would start doing all the stuff that you're supposed to do, like hiring an editor and a cover designer and being on social media and having a newsletter and all that stuff. And then what happened was, like, book 5, I think it was, or maybe 6, I wrote this book called Cocky Nerd, and it did well, and it had, popular tropes, and I just went on to write the next one. And then I got a message from Thelina Hawkins one day telling me I had to change it to Sexy, or she said I had to change the title. So Cockygate happened, and there was this little it was a big scandal at the time, and I found myself, I wasn't in the center of it, but I found myself a part of it because I just, like, I grew up in Canada. So she asked me to do that. I was like, okay, I'll do it. And I just changed the title with, no fuss. And I had a Facebook page at the time. I didn't even have like the app on my phone. And all of a sudden I started getting all these emails that people were following me, and I could see all these people downloading Sexy Nerd. And I was just getting all this support from people I didn't know just because they hated Thelina Hawkins, and I changed the title of my book. And so one of my books kind of just had this very unexpected notoriety, and I didn't take advantage of it. But a couple months later, I think possibly because of Cockygate, someone from Tantor, first an agent approached me and wanted to, she thought that Sexy Nerd would make a good audiobook and that she could shop it around and get a deal. And I eventually signed with her and didn't hear from her again. And then somebody from Tantor directly came to me through Facebook, and they wanted to publish Sexy Nerd. And so I threw them to my agent, and right when I was about to sign the Tantor deal, my agent came in with a better offer from Dreamscape. And so I signed that. And, meanwhile, I hadn't listened to romance audiobooks at all. I was listening to audiobooks, had no idea that anybody would ever want to publish my books as audiobooks. So anyways, I had cast approval. The first pair of actors that Dreamscape sent me included Mackenzie Cartwright, and I knew right away from listening to her samples that I liked her voice. I liked her energy. And a few months later it came out, and I was totally blown away. I was very nervous that it might not be funny, and it was. Anyways, the long story short is Mackenzie Cartwright was amazing, and she totally got the rhythm of my writing and the sassiness of my character. And the biggest surprise was that her guy voice was, to me, a lot sexier than the actual guy's voice. And so I reached out to her, and and it's not something I normally do, like, unless there's been some kind of, like a Facebook ad or whatever before that. But I found her an email on the internet, and I reached out to her, and I told her, thank you for not being terrible. And she was like,
love those emails.
and she was like, look forward to working with you again soon, winky face. And at that point, I had no idea how to do another book. But then the next book that came out, which is my 9th book, actually was kind of a sleeper hit as an ebook. And I contacted her, and I was like, I think I can do this as an ebook, and I probably have to hire a producer because I have no idea who the guy should be. And she basically acted like a producer without calling herself a producer. And I didn't realize until years later that she actually produced my first books. And, she never asked for a fee. So anyways, that's how I got into it. It's because of, it was because of a gesture from Tantor and the fate of an agent getting another offer from Dreamscape, and then me reaching out to Mackenzie and loving Mackenzie. That's how I ultimately got into audiobooks.
Amazing. There's so much that you laid out there that I can't wait to dig into
Okay. Yeah.
a little bit later specifically. Like you really
Yeah.
laid the groundwork for a lot of things that we want to talk about.
Yeah.
And let me just say, as an actor, I love an agent and a manager who contacts you and then goes silent. It's like, I'm going to make your career, kid. And then
Yeah.
it's like crickets. You're like,
There's
thanks.
That's just kind of standard. And well, the part that I left out was that I first sent, I emailed about Come Back to Bed to the agent. I was like, look, I have this book that's doing really well, and I think it would be a good audiobook. Didn't hear from them. So it's like, if I had gotten a response from the agent, then I probably would have sold the rights, and it would have, my audiobook career would have gone a different way. This was why I got into self-publishing. So
yeah, amazing. Okay. Pivoting to you, Christine, when did you publish your first book, and when did you get into audio, and what would you say are some of the hallmarks or key things?
Hallmarks. That was the last, because of course I'm writing the questions down, because there was no way I can remember 3 whole questions. That is
I know, too many. Sorry.
When I'm writing something, it's like scallions and a lime, and my husband says, "Oh, can you get milk?" It's like, okay, that's 3 things.
Too many.
Like, no, I can't. No, around the corner. That's all the way around the corner. 3 things. No. Okay, so I first published as C.D. Reiss in 2013, January. Gold Rush. And it happened to hit a bunch of nerves. Did really well. It was so on trend. I had no idea how on trend this thing was. I was just writing a book. And the audio I didn't do till 2015. And I thought it was longer. I thought that I spent years kind of not doing it, but really it was only 2 years. And so then I did the first one that was on trend. It did really well. They got nominated for 2 Audie Awards.
Amazing.
Was that
Audie?
Marriage Games?
Huh?
Was that Marriage Games?
No, because it didn't win, and that pissed me off. Now I like the girl that won, but it was like no. Did they split the vote because 2 books in the same series were nominated? Did it split the vote? Like, I don't know. It doesn't matter. I was like, so then I wrote Marriage Games, and that won. So that's fine. I did that. I was like, I'm doing this. This is what I'm doing right now.
Wait, did you start out self-publishing, or did you sell the rights ever?
Never. No. I sold the audio rights to a couple of things, and it's okay. I don't like it so much. I could change my mind for the right publisher, but I have not met the right publisher yet. Hallmarks. Oh, I don't know, Samantha. What are the hallmarks? I haven't done 2 now.
Gosh.
You know what? You're only going to say nice things. This is not what I'm trying to do.
It's true. I'm only going to gush.
I know. You're very sweet. I usually do dual, right? Because it's faster, because it's less organization. If I'm producing myself, there's no duet's harder. So in some cases, when I do duet, I have somebody else produce it. So I have less kind of, actually, it's not that I have less control. It's that I can't abdicate control over things. Like, I'm like, I don't know, you figure it out. Because I trust my actors. Like, I really trust my actors. But like, producers want things, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, so my hallmarks are laziness. Hiring the right people to do the right things. And can I tell? I'm going to tell everybody this. So this is not an answer to the question. This is just me talking fast about Samantha. I didn't know who this lady was. So Erin Mallon had a table reading of her audio play.
Yep.
And Emma Wilder couldn't make it. Emma Wilder is like my favorite. I just want to squish her face.
Yeah.
Because her male voices, people have emailed me and said, so who is the male voice on Emma's part?
Yeah.
Who is that narrator? I'm like, you think I wouldn't credit him? I said, I will never tell. So anyway, so you took Emma's part because she was pregnant, right? And so it's all people I know, from Tanya Ebby over here to who was on the other end? Oh, Andy was here, and there's a lot of people.
There's a lot of people.
And I know all of them, except for you. And you open your mouth, and I was like, she needs to be on my thing.
Christine, I had the exact same experience. That's why I cast her.
Were you there?
Guys, this is really uncomfortable.
And now you know. I feel when you gush.
This is what I'm gonna go back to your hallmarks of writing, Christine, and your stories, and take this off of me, right? Thank you so much. This is a wonderful, beautiful compliment. Okay, something that sticks out to me about your writing is that while dark things happen in your book, I wouldn't necessarily say that there are very dark themes. And I think that you have very character-driven stories in the contexts of, like, you know, some stabby-stab mafia men and certain things happening like that. But there's really, in my experience, the focus is so much about being really character-driven and giving those characters really fleshed out clear arcs and drives and fears and desires in the context of kind of dark things happening around them. I haven't read the whole,
please, don't read the canon. But it's really, even from the beginning of this, I said, no matter what happens, and this is from 2013, I said, no matter what happens, love drives the bus. Love motivates. If there's a murder, it's for love of, if not the main character, because in the beginning we don't see the main character really hasn't shown up. It's love of community, it's love of family, it's love of the world that you're living in. Even vengeance has to be motivated by love and not pride, right? It can't be motivated by ego, because it's not interesting, and it gets very arch. So if you always motivate through love, you're going to find those places. You know the ones. Yeah. The ones.
So this is a great.
Can I just say your books are just so intelligently written and fascinating. Like I will preface this by saying that I have horrible reading habits, but I've been reading Marriage Games off and on for like 6 or 7 months. It's not because I don't love it. I love it, but it's just so fascinating. All like just the power dynamics and the way I'm learning so much about a particular kink, about the sub-dom relationship in the context of a married couple, a marriage that's in trouble, and they work together, and there's just so much power shifting happen. It's so genius. And like, I'm not really interested in reading about that stuff in any other context. And this is
what I'm doing with my hands.
No, I mean, I can really say, and we'll get into this when we start talking about the challenges of writing spice, but I can say that the way you approach and write about kink doesn't fetishize it in a way, and really connect. And I think it ties back to that going from love and having fully fleshed out characters, that you understand why people are exploring or drawn to things. And even most recently in working on Blood Bride, there's so much thoughtful care of writing such a complex person that does not just be like, well, I'm into this now, not knowing anything. That they really work through, okay, this is new, and why do I feel complicated about that?
Why am I okay? Why do I trust this guy? Why? Because you would have just, and this comes from, I have a screenwriting background too, and it comes from like, how do people actually react? You have someone in a house and they see a ghost. You're already in a place where nobody has been. Right? If they see an actual ghost, you're already where you're not supposed to be. That, I had a friend who wrote horror who said that should be the end of the movie, because that you have now hit everything, right? Because everything from there is like a made-up world, right? So that's why when my sister used to be in the Twilight fandom, and so I was working with her on this, and she's like, why doesn't she realize he's a vampire right away? Why is she stupid? And I'm like, dude, if you met a guy and he did this and he did that, is vampire the first place you go?
Right. Right.
No.
Yeah.
Even if you know he's into blood, then you go to Blood King.
Right.
You're not going to vampire right away.
Right.
That's not normal.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's what makes for both of you makes your writing so actable for narrators, because you're thinking about exactly what you're describing, Christine, of what's the human experience in this.
Yeah.
And in order to act something, you need to really understand a character or character's humanity.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what else are you doing there?
Mhm. And I think that's true for both, whether or not you're playing a joke and the comedy of a situation, or like the horror and like the the tension thriller of it. So okay, this is a great transition to starting to talk about writing then. So there's like so many in this day and age, everybody's got like a how-to guide and a book and a masterclass that you can take, and there's one way to write, and that's not true. And we know in any
No.
creative endeavor, there's no one way to do something. But for you both personally, are there certain like proverbial sticky notes or reminders or things that you keep front of mind to help keep you on track to write like a good story?
So,
Who?
so for me, it's I have to remember to stay out of my own way. Actually, like I overthink everything. I research everything, and I have to constantly remind myself and be reminded by other people in my life that what I write is people are coming to it for escapism. I wrote I wrote my first like grumpy boss fake relationship romantic comedy. It was called A Very Bossy Christmas, and while I was writing it,
That's a good title.
Thank you. I wrote the first one called A Very Bossy Christmas. There's more out there now. But while I was writing it, I was legitimately like emailing an HR person, and I was like, okay, just lay it out for me. If this actually happened, if this boss at this firm was actually requesting that his executive assistant, pretend to be his girlfriend, like what would happen to him? What would be the repercussions? And then, she told me, she's like, but Kayley, also don't worry about it. because we come to romance for escapism. And I printed out her little note, and
but you're looking for a third act break. It's not reality. I'm looking for
no, but this was the beginning. So I worked that in to the story and the character because the guy was a lawyer. And so I had him draw up a contract before for her to agree to, if they should happen to have sex because they're both hot as fuck, she agrees not to, fire him or sue him and blah, 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 blah. And it became a really funny scene that I love, but it all went, I give my neuroses to my characters in a way that, plays out funny and sexy, hopefully. But yeah, I can spend days just researching like stuff like, if I mention a song, I will check several sources to make sure that song actually was out 12 years ago, when the chapter was written, that kind of thing. And like, it's stuff that I don't think is going to trick people up if they're reading the book. Like, people just really want to feel stuff. And that's the thing that I need to sort of remind myself, is that this is about making people feel a certain way, ultimately. So that's for me. I don't know how helpful that is for other authors, but like, I need
to get out of your own way. Yeah,
that's it.
What about you, Christine?
So I went to USC Film School for screenwriting, and that went nowhere, in case you're asking. But what I learned there, I mean, it was the best $50,000 I ever spent. They start with the premise, which is don't be boring. That's it. That's the whole thing. 3 words: don't be boring. And you're like, okay. And then you spend the next 2 years, 2 or 3 years or whatever, it's a master's degree. You learn how to not be boring. And it took me 10 years to figure out how to actually implement that. But it's when I find it's getting slow, or when someone gives me a note that it's slow here,
Mm.
That doesn't mean that it's slow there. It means it's slow in the sequence before, right? It means that I don't know what I'm worried about. This could be the best banter in the world. There could be some incredibly vivid act of violence that is absolutely interesting. But if we don't know what the character is hoping to get out of it, and it's like you have to keep track of so many things, what the secondary character is hoping to get, what they're afraid of losing, and what the audience is afraid that they're losing, or what the audience hopes they'll get, which are sometimes two different things, you end up with like, I don't, you end up with, I don't care. I don't know why I'm here. And so because I'm a pantser, another reason I couldn't make it in this town is I can't outline for shit. But I reverse outline. A lot of pantsers do this. I didn't invent it. And that's where I'll also find like, oh, I don't know what we answered this question in this chapter, and 2 chapters later, there's no new question.
Yeah.
There's no new thing that's driving. Yes, she's in the house and she's finding things out, but what? So that's really how I approach the story. They call it, my old teacher called it tasting the soup. You got to taste the soup, and so you have to kind of experience that scene as a reader. So you have to like have this fucking clean mind, which I got nothing, right? What? I'm doing the annotations for the submission series for my Kickstarter, and so I'm doing the digital annotations. I'll be done in a second, but this is funny. I keep the annotations are always like, I wrote this. I have no recollection of this at all.
I forget everything.
Anyway.
I think that's true though for a lot of creatives, because for me as a narrator, there are times that like when I get pickups or I'll go back and like listen to things, and it's like almost like I was in, and I think it's sometimes almost good that almost like it feels like I was in a fugue state.
You were in the
and
zone.
It was just and it just happens, and you go back and go, wow, like that's what I did there. Okay, so yeah, I think that's a common feeling for a lot of creatives.
So if you're in it like that, how do you know when you've hit on a good story, when you're on the right track? If you have, Kayley, you were describing what sounded like a trap for you is getting into your own head about something. How do you find the space to kind of step outside of it and say, oh, I've really got something here, and keep going with it?
If I make myself cry when I'm reading it at a certain point, then I know that I know other people are going to. I know that the characters are absolutely real for me. And that's really what's important. And I mean, honestly, we're not talking about the spice yet, but it's like, if I'm getting turned on, then I know that other people are going to. It's all that stuff. And, sometimes I make myself laugh, but mostly I don't. Like, that's just, mostly I'm writing, mostly the stuff that I think is very, very serious, because it's always serious for the characters, is it's not funny to me, but it's funny to other people, So, yeah.
What about you, Christine?
I was thinking about her this way. She was talking about not laughing, and so I got a little like into my own head for a second. What was the question?
I was curious how it sort of through this process you were describing, and for you it sounds like you're really deeply in it and sort of picking apart the character's experience and getting inside their head pretty deeply. How do you know when you're on the right track with what you're writing? Do you zoom out a little bit?
I have no idea.
No idea.
No,
that's
no
fair.
clue. And if I built more time into my schedule, I would have more people read before I publish. But it's just been since COVID, it's been like a tough, I don't write as fast. So yeah, I mean, I know when it's boring. When it's boring. When I don't want to write it, and I'm like, oh, fuck, I don't want to write the scene. Oh, well, maybe the scene is a problem. Maybe I'm not the problem. But otherwise, I don't. Sorry.
No, don't be. Sometimes it's better to just know when you're on the wrong track than anything else.
Yeah, that's what I got. Wrong track. A lot of wrong track.
So we've touched on this a little bit, but one of the things about genre fiction, any genre, right, are tropes themselves. We watch certain movies and things because we come and we expect these certain tropes. So for you guys in your writing process, how, what place did tropes have in your writing? Did they help? Did they hinder? Yeah.
Oh, they have to help for a rom-com, especially. I think I actually start with the tropes when I'm coming up with a story. And I did that thing where I recently started adding, like a subtitle on Amazon where it just lists out the tropes, because romance readers are trope shopping a lot now. So it helps the algorithms. But I just, there's only like maybe 2 books I did where I didn't start with the tropes, and it's harder to sell. I don't know what I'm selling people. Like I can say, oh, it's written funny and there's a hot guy, but
no,
so,
she's absolutely,
sold.
that's the way to do it. That is the way. I can't do it that way. I fail every time. No, I did my Crown series is all trope based.
Yeah, those are billionaires.
Yeah, the billionaire trope. It's fine. I had fun. I enjoyed writing them. I don't like it.
What do you not like about it? Does it feel constricting? Does it feel?
I don't know. Someone asked me, I wrote The Edge, right? I wrote The Edge, and it has not a single trope in it. A lot of sex. And happy ending and all that. And it's a main couple and all of those things. There's not a single fucking trope in this fucking thing. Can't market it. Worth the shit. Thank you, Kayley. You're absolutely correct. It's impossible to market without tropes.
I mean, that's the issue. So, but the thing that I was thinking about this yesterday, because I was studying the document that you sent.
See, she read it. That's great. Thank you.
The thing about storytelling is conflict is what moves the story forward, right? And in a rom-com, the conflict is, the question and the conflict is, well, why aren't they falling in love? Why aren't they having sex now? Mm-hmm. And the answer is whatever trope you have chosen. It's because they're friends and they're afraid of ruining their friendship if they become lovers. It's because she's his best friend's little sister, and he doesn't want to fuck up the relationship with the brother, and blah blah blah. And the trope is the answer to a lot of questions. And I do things like I now will write the blurb. Sometimes I write it first, but I try to write it very early on, because then you have your signposts and you keep reminding yourself while you're writing the book, what you're promising the readers, and you got to deliver on the promise. And, and we'll talk about this later probably, but, I don't tend to necessarily deliver things in the way that people expected or in the way that other people would write it. But I'm still, I'm not going to say this is totally a fake relationship story if there's only some fake relationship in there. But like for the billionaires back, it just kind of felt like we had to add in a fake relationship moment just to prolong the story, really. and we did it, and we made a twist, which I won't get into, but there was a twist on it that I was proud of, because it felt integral to the story and to her character and her not being able to open her heart to him yet, kind of thing. So it's not like I don't use them in a superficial way.
Right.
But to me, they are very helpful.
It sounds like you're describing like that some people are looking for more of a rigidity with their tropes, and you're using it kind of as a guidepost.
Yeah.
And expanding on that a little bit.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm expanding on it, but I don't know. It's just in my nature to not do what I've seen everyone else do in their books. Sure. And again, that's one of those things. I know readers don't care. Readers are perfectly happy to read the same thing over and over again for the most part. But, right. I want to like it.
Well, and this is why I love having you both here, because I think that this is kind of to the earlier point about creativity, that sometimes that those guideposts can be really freeing, particularly for the type of subgenre that you're writing, Kayley, whereas it can feel really restrictive for somebody like you, Christine, and the types of stories that you're telling, and the way that you write a story from this kind of pantser, I'm in it perspective. So if a trope or a micro trope pops up, great. But that for you to have that as a directive feels like tough.
It doesn't work for me. Like when you say like I have to have a scene with one bed or whatever, which I think is a great micro trope. Love it. I can't. I have a hard time. But what I did with Blood Bride was I started typing out the tropes as I was writing. I was like, oh, this is a single dad trope. Right?
Nice.
a twisty one.
Right? A twist, yeah.
Turned it on its head a little bit.
Yeah. I'll allow it. Look. He is single and he is a dad. So.
Yeah.
And he's 500 years old. And so is his son.
He's his son. So
he's an old dad.
Age gap?
Oh,
You got age gap.
Oh, I wrote it. Oh. What is a vampire book if not age gap?
There can only be age gap if they're hundreds of years old.
Yeah.
But I do think, somebody in the comments just mentioned this, and I think it speaks to exactly what you both are saying, which is that if you put in a trope for just the sake of a trope, just to sell a book, and you don't connect it to the story, then it does fall flat. And I do think even readers that are going because they can't get enough, friends to lovers, sniff that out. Readers are really intelligent, and I think appreciate that it's like, well, look, it's just like cooking, right? Like you love potatoes, but you're doing something a little bit different with potatoes. Great.
Yeah.
But Christine, have you gotten any pushback on? It sounds like you have written with tropes in mind, but predominantly you're not doing that. Do you get pushback on that from your readers?
No, but they are very different readers.
Yeah.
And that's, my readers come back to me, but it's a different subset. Like I don't know. First of all, standalone's different than series, different readers entirely than series. And my backlist is all full of, hey, series of standalones about billionaires that are like kind of gentler, and then there's the mafia, which is not as mafia as somebody else's, but it's deeply Italian. And, and it's like, you're pulling just, and so I think, people who come to me very often come to me for me, for the way that I do things, which is fine until you do vampires and they're like, look, PNR is like one step over that.
But wait till they meet these vampires.
Which is like my greatest fear in the world, but that's okay. We're fine. We're fine.
More than fine in my book. Do you think that there's things that you guys with these tropes, or not these tropes, but in the certain kind of subgenres that you write, that you can explore that you couldn't elsewhere in another subgenre?
I'm exploring neuroses more than anything and resistance in a funny way. And there's like just so many different ways that I can express why someone is going to resist wanting to date someone who might be totally perfect for them, but they're also total assholes for making you feel stuff, it's just a never ending. I have so many stories to tell about not wanting to get into a relationship with someone. That's another hallmark, I guess, is like most of my stories are he falls first. And that's what was weird about The Billionaires back. It was the first time I wrote in the first chapter, the girl was so hung up on him. And it was very, very painful for me to write, because that's not usually how I live my life, but I loved it. And I felt like, that chapter was probably the best thing I'd written up until then, because I got so sucked in writing it. And that was when I was crying. I was making myself cry with the first chapter. And I was like, yeah, this isn't going to work. But then I had to twist it. And it was like, okay, well, I'm not going to feel this way ever again, because I know how much he can make me feel. So I'm just going to push him away. And then it became the usual Kayley Loring book where it's like, sass, 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 sass. And then, oh, okay, no more sass. Let's have sex.
Or have sassy sex.
There's a lot of sassy sex to be had as well. What was the question? Yeah, I can explore sassy sex.
Yeah,
I
well,
think,
that neuroses, like you take that
yeah,
neuroses in a different subgenre,
yeah.
and you can't really unpack it and explore it with care in the same way that you can within a romantic comedy. What about for you, Christine? Are there certain things that you can uniquely explore in the undefinable subgenre that you write in?
Yeah, I mean, does one become amoral when one becomes immortal? Is our
Mm,
morality coming from a place of a temporal place where we know that we're going to be dead at some point, so we have X amount of time? Would you actually be a decent person if you knew you were never going to die?
mhm.
Um, I bet I could try to explore that in a rom-com, but I'm not going
I would
That'd
read
certainly be a
that.
challenge.
to.
So digging a little bit more down into more specifics about writing, you guys both talk about this screenwriting background that you have. So I feel like it's really going to speak to the answer to our curiosity in question. But one of the things that I do feel like are hallmarks for both of your writing is great dialogue. So is that something that you both felt that you just that was always natural? Was that something that you really honed in your screenwriting backgrounds? Is it still a challenge? Am I just delusional being like, no, dialogue is still so hard?
I think dialogue is the easiest part, really. For me, like, I was only interested in writing dialogue and creating characters when I wrote screenplays. And, that's, you have to learn subtext and how to tell a story, how to convey a character's intentions and motivations through dialogue somehow. And the thing I had to really learn with novels was, you know, that I had the freedom to explain what was going on in people's heads. It was such a new thing, and then I kind of like leaned into it probably a little bit too much because, like I said, I get stuck in my head a lot, and so now my characters do too. And for me, I mostly have to make sure that I get into the dialogue, into the conversations faster, because sometimes there's like an entire page of the character thinking about what they're going to say or what they're seeing before they actually say something. And then it can become a really long, nice back and forth banter. But I feel like I need to pull back from the internal monologues a little bit sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I think what screenwriting did for me was my descriptions are very terse. I don't like, I'll give you if I can't get the room or the area or the whatever in like 2 sentences, I'm like, just like, cut. Because if you just give like a few specific things, like specificity is everything. A few specific things about that place or about that person. I don't describe how people look because for me, it's boring to write. There's no, yes, he has rock hard abs, like whatever. But unless it's her reaction to a certain thing that makes him special or different or specific, and that's the same thing with screenwriting, like, because you don't know who the actor is going to be. Who's the actor? You don't know. Dark hair, light hair, it doesn't matter. Unless it's important to the story, you leave it out. And you just leave it to the set designer. Except you need a clock. You need a clock here, and that's what the clock looks like, and it's over there. That's it. So that I took away is that any more than that just bores me writing it.
Yeah.
And has dialogue always like then being able to not be in conflict with being like, okay, we're specific, we're succinct in our descriptions. So then a bulk of the writing is then that dialogue and banter. And has that dialogue been
Right.
easy for you, or is that
so going through the submission series, which is the first one I wrote, you can see my ease with dialogue, my facility with dialogue, and on and on. They're just talking, right? And now, because I have been kind of trained, reading a lot of romance books and seeing how it's done, I have started to add a lot more, not specificity, a lot of letting the reader know what's going on in la head, in the head.
Mm.
And that seems to be the preferred method, because I want my readers to be happy. I want to give them what they want, and it's not going to skin off my back to do that. So there's less subtextual clues, and it's more straightforward now.
Yeah.
That's it.
And have you had anything that you found that really just kills dialogue on the page? I'm hearing you say a lot of things that you have found that have worked really well, but have you come across an instance where you were like, this just isn't working? And what do you feel caused that?
If I don't give them a prop or a strong tension of something they want to know from the other person, like if you just put them in a room and you don't give them something in the room to discuss, or something that they run into the room pissed off about or needing to know, or they need a reason to have the conversation. Even if the reason is we have nothing to talk about, like this happens in marriage games. There's nothing going on here. And that's attention, but you can't do that all the time. Right. So
Yeah.
That's when I know that I have not set up the previous scene properly.
Right. And it sounds like for your writing, a lot of the plot is moving forward through that dialogue, because it's not as heavy on some of the descriptions and other stuff.
It's easier. It's so much easier to just say, I don't want to.
It really
makes from out. You don't need a whole thing. I don't want to. And then you know that he wants to, so he's mad. And now he's going to push her. And I'm not talking about sex because we only do consent. Right. And now he's going to push her. And she's already said she doesn't want to, so she's going to resist. And so then you have that push and pull right there because she said the words.
Right.
She said it.
Yeah.
Hearing you describe that just makes me think of, my background is in musical theater. One of my backgrounds is in musical theater, and I work a lot with writers on their emerging musicals.
Oh, so you're a dramaturg?
This is a whole other conversation, but I run a theater company that essentially serves as a little
Really?
bit. But I certainly help facilitate that kind of development in this theater organization that I run. It's very hard. But what I was going to say is that with musicals, if you write there's no point in writing a song or placing a song in a scene unless the tension has gotten so high or some motivation is so elevated that it can't be anything else but a song. And it sounds what you're describing about where you place your dialogue feels a lot like that to me, that like if there's no reason for them to be having this conversation out loud, if it's something I could manage in their internal monologue, that I'm not putting dialogue there because it's not going to have the same forward motion that I want it to. And writing music and musicals and placing them within the scene is exactly like that. That's what's happening in my head.
Right. I mean, I would say that more if the motivation before that is strong enough, and that motivation can come from dialogue, or it can come from interior monologue, or it can come from an action scene. Because if you have an event scene and the aftermath scene is where motivations change, right? So you have an event, say the event is the wedding and the church went on fire. You know that what they're going to talk about is that event before, and you need that aftermath scene. I have missed aftermath scenes so much. You absolutely positively need them. And then you can but then it can be, oh my God, I'm so upset. Did you see what? Yes, it's so. And it can be so much more effective to express motivation than to say, I want this through your mouth, than to say it in your head.
Yeah.
I have all of that. I'm like flashing hand signals. It's I'm
but the conversations are really, I want this, I don't want this, right? That's kind of what banter essentially is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
And also that, like you were speaking of earlier, like really understanding your relationship to subtext, because particularly in rom-coms, when you are working with why can we, these tropes or the reasons that we can't be together, how is that infused in every little back and forth that you're having through this dance? And also, I think the hard thing in rom-com, and it's different for every rom-com that I get, is you really get a sense of an author who has an inherent sense of humor that is very specifically theirs. And you're like, okay, great,
Yeah.
I'm bringing out the sense of humor. And somebody who maybe doesn't have like a great natural sense of humor, or is trying to chase a
Yeah.
joke that they think people want. And like,
Yeah.
how do you find, like, was screenwriting for you like the way that you're like, no, I found my voice and how to tell a joke and how to keep that movement back and
I
forth?
did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wrote plays as well, and short fiction actually. But I think I could just be an asshole and say that I'm a very intuitive writer, but I was thinking about it, and I think what being an intuitive writer is like I actually have 100 thoughts and make 100 choices very, very quickly without realizing it, right? Because like I've been doing this for so long that a lot of it feels like it's coming naturally to me, but I actually am making a lot of choices and decisions really, really fast. And so for me, that's the easy part. I mean, the timing of things is that's super easy. It's a joy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're great at it. Okay, so
Thanks.
I want to talk about spice. I want to make sure we have time to obviously talk about the audio piece of this. But before we walk away from crafting stories, we've kind of hinted at writing spice. So as somebody who's not a writer, my instinct is that writing spice seems like a skill that's like a calculus of having a good instinct for it, plus a bit of research, then plus just practice of writing these scenes. Is that true in your experience, or what do you think? How did your skill kind of develop, or how did you find your skill for writing spice?
Christine.
Oh, I go first.
You don't have
Yeah.
to.
Do it.
No, I've been fucking for a long time.
Yeah, right?
You know? I just start fucking. I've been fucking for a while. I started this when I was, late in life. So to me, you just make it interesting. You props, and I'm not a big sex toy person, which is fine, no judgment. But
Right.
So when I say props, I don't mean that. I mean the bed is a prop, the table is a prop, the copy machine is a prop. What kind of sex is it? It's the same as anything. It's the same as you go in with an emotion, you go in with a motivation, you want to get something out of it, and by the end of the scene, the motivation and the intention change. So
it's really driving the plot for you. It needs to drive the plot as well.
Yeah, it's like it's like an interview scene in a mystery, right? So you got the detective and you got the suspect, and and you know what you have to do. Right? You know the mechanics of it. I'm going to ask you a question and you're going to answer and you're going to lie and then I'm going to do this and that. If you know why you're going into that scene and why everybody's going into that scene, then you have an interesting scene, even if the mechanics of that scene are like something that you've seen 1,000 times.
I imagine I know the answer to this already, just based off of what you're saying about how tropes play out in your writing. But for you in writing, in dipping into kink, or specific types of sex, do you find that just comes to you in writing the scene, or do you ever set out to write a particular type of sexual encounter ahead of time?
I have to say that structurally, anal comes at a structural place, right? I mean, this is just what it is.
It's facts. It's facts. Christine, it's the facts. You speak the truth.
Yeah, you can't throw it in.
In real life and on the page.
It writes itself.
Yeah.
You gotta earn the butthole.
Yeah. There's a
Every
reason,
time.
there's a point. You can't put it in the middle. It's just not where it goes. Okay, that's not a kink, honestly.
Right.
No.
So when people would say, good people, my people, say, look, we want more Jonathan and Monica. Look, I want more Jonathan and Monica too. But it's not that I have explored all of their kinks, because they're my kinkiest couple and the marriage games couple. It's that I don't have anything else to say about the power dynamic between them. I have said everything that I need to say about that power dynamic. And so it's less about exploring certain kinks and more about exploring a power dynamic.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, and it makes sense for so much of what you're saying of where you don't set out to use a kink or use a trope. You're really kind of fleshing out these characters, and then those characters in that situation, where are they going to go and what story needs to be told through dialogue or through sex or.
Is she going to push and pull? Is this
Yeah.
the moment where she has to let go? And then, well, what's the let go kink?
Mhm,
You know,
mhm.
what is he going to do to facilitate her letting go? Or is he going to resist her trying to take some power? Or, you know, how do those two things relate? And then there are things in the room that, you know.
Yeah, they're props.
They're props.
Kayley, what about for you? Like, spice in rom-coms is a great tension breaker, right? We've been dancing around this all the time. So often. What's your relationship to writing spice and how it comes in your books?
So in the beginning, I was writing sex as I had experienced it. And so this is definitely TMI, but here goes. So I've been divorced for quite a while, but my ex-husband, it wasn't a good marriage, fantastic sex. And a lot of it. And so for a long time, I was just writing about the kind of sex I had with my ex-husband. And I don't read reviews on Amazon anymore, but I remember seeing a review of a book. I think it was Come Back to Bed, which was my 9th book. And the criticism was that the sex was kind of over the top. And she said, I mean, oh my God, they had sex in 3 different positions the first time they had sex. And I was like, oh,
what do you
honey,
do? Oh my God.
What kind of life are you having, right?
It's okay, take the stars. Oh my God.
But I then realized in the context of storytelling in romance, I could pace myself better. Because the first time a man and a woman have sex in one of my books, it doesn't have to be about the sex. It's really about the choice that they're now having sex. And it's, again, going to be defined by what kind of trope I've set up, which means what kind of energy dynamic they have. So like if it's enemies to lovers, you just want it hard and fast, right? And it's going to be fun. And if it's friends to lovers, it's really just about a transition in the way that they're seeing each other. And so it's a little bit lovely, but also hot. So there's that. And so there's like, I don't write about buttholes, but
I don't write about buttholes either. Let's be real.
I have a strict no butt stuff policy in my books, and I joke about it a lot in the books too. But there's like certain things that, you know, there's certain marks that you want to hit, and you're like, okay, well, is it more interesting from the guy's POV or the girl's POV? And you think in terms of like, is this dual or is it duet? Because you have a lot more freedom if it's duet too. So there's those choices. But I would say that I have been much more conscious lately. It's much more important to me now to write about the experience of these people having sex in the context of the relationship they have, like where they are in their relationship. And it's also, it gets harder every time because I have that thing where like, I don't want to write the same sex scene over and over again in the same book or from book to book or what anybody else has been writing. And so I'm at like, I'm way over 20 now, way over 20 books, and it gets daunting. But again, you know, you just throw in different character dynamics and different locations, and one day a butt probably. I don't know.
Well, it's all about timing. As Christine told us, you know, the butt's going to find you.
Because I can't find
time.
I'm really curious to hear, because you mentioned writing in dual, if it's the male POV or the female POV, if you're writing MF. I'm curious to know a little bit more about how I know it's probably different for every author, but how do you make that choice? How does that come to you?
I don't think I realized, I don't think, because I don't listen to that many audiobooks, I'm an eyeball reader. I didn't realize that putting a sex scene in a male POV during duel doesn't really work. Look, you ever heard Samantha Brentmore voice a guy?
Yeah.
You listen to yourself, woman. It is. I don't know if female narrators are just more skilled. I suspect that may be the case. But they don't seem to have as much problem going low.
Right.
Yeah.
But the men going high, I think it's harder. It must be harder.
Yeah.
It is hard for them not to sound too effeminate. It is.
It's easy to dip into falsetto in a way that
Mhm.
doesn't feel
I thought falsetto was higher. Is falsetto lower too?
you know, I'm saying that guys, I think, like try some men pop
Oh, I see
themselves
what
up
you
so
mean.
high
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
you're like, well, I mean,
Are
Minnie
you
Mouse does
Chicago
exist,
yet?
but yeah.
So I have learned the hard way that sex scenes when they're in duel are happier places when they're from the women's POV.
That's interesting. I am very aware that listeners want to hear certain things from the male POV, and I take that into consideration. It's not always the reason that I will do something. For me, it's more like who's really receiving the action and really going to be responding emotionally, and also like when I write a blowjob scene from the female POV, honestly, I worry sometimes that it just reads like the Kayley Loring guidebook to how to do a blowjob. So I will do that from the male POV because he's having an actual response to it, right? But I do think from the first time they have sex, it's almost always the woman's POV because she's thinking about more things than the guy is. The guy just wants to go in, that's it. And the woman, I can like, there's just, I mean, and like back to Samantha Brentmore again, but like the scene that I wrote when they first have sex and the billionaire is back, I spent an entire week writing that because it was the most slow burn book I'd ever written. And we had established how much she cared about him in the very beginning. We know how much she's resisting him up until then. And it's finally happening. And I was like, I mean, it has to be epic. And I knew I didn't want it to be because he did respect her as his brother's his best friend's little sister.
Yeah.
It wasn't going to be crazy sex all at once, but I wanted to just really mean something, and I didn't want her to suddenly lose all of her inhibitions and the neuroses, but I also didn't, I was like, you kind of just want to get to the sex. But I can't just abandon the fact that she is going to be in her head a little bit. So it was just this balancing act. And then I wanted her to like finally enjoy his body and all that kind of thing, for him to be gentle with her and to her to notice it. And it was just this very, very long chapter. And it was the only, I would say, like chapter 1 and that chapter was the only one I knew it would be amazing. But those were the 2 chapters where I was like, if those chapters work, the whole book is going to work. And then I heard, like, I cried listening to both of those chapters when I listened to your files. There was a lot to do. Like, there were a lot of shifting dynamics in that one chapter. And it was so beautifully performed. Like, you nailed it. So
Thank you. This is just getting really weird. One of the things that I love, like my favorite, like whether or not whose POV these sex scenes come from, for me, what's so satisfying when I'm prepping them or narrating them, and I don't know, Rose, what your thought is on this, but to the point of it needs to be connected to plot and it's pushing things forward. It's always, for me, it's most satisfying when we're sticking with the POV of the person who's changed or impacted or experiencing the most through this from kind of like a plot or character arc perspective. Or conversely, somebody that you're trying to hold a little bit of mystery from me from. Sometimes if I am not given his or her POV in something, I'm left wondering, like, what did she experience in this? And then I get it in the next chapter in a really exciting way. But I think it's, when it's intentionally used, I think when that POV is intentionally used in Spices.
And there's
I
a
love
comment in
writing.
the chat that says from Nana Malone, apparently at some point said, the sexy needs to be in the POV of the person who has the most to lose, which I think speaks to what you're saying, Samantha, a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little bit like that for sure. Okay, so we've mentioned this now in the kind of duet duel, which starts to get us into audio, which you both have done for many years now. So when you started consistently putting books out in audio, how did that start to influence the stories that you guys tell?
Oh, for me, it was so amazing. It was so great when I realized that I could write for actors again. The first book that I did that was Back for More, which was, I think, it was in 2019, towards the end of 2019, where I actually booked Teddy and Mackenzie when I started writing it. And at that point, I had been listening to romance audio and a lot of Teddy stuff. And I was, when you start listening to Teddy Hamilton, he's got that like ASMR kind of quality to his voice, and it's just so lovely. And
it's right in that range. It's right in that range,
right? And he's such a good actor too. And I was starting to listen to podcast interviews, and so I got a sense of what his personality was like too. And so I added stuff, but I did, one of the traps I think when you do write for audio is to try to give, if you're in oral fixation like I was back when that was where everyone was talking about audiobooks, I saw all the comments about what people like and certain words they like to hear. And I had never used the word pussy in a book before or in my life. Teddy Hamilton says the word pussy in a very specific way. Like he has this weird Teddy Hamilton accent that doesn't make sense because he grew up in like Southern California, right? And he sounds like he's from, I don't know, the hills of Colorado. I don't. But I wanted him to say pussy in one of my books, and so I wrote in pussy. And I wanted him to hear him say a lot of things, and it just became like, oh, I want to hear Teddy say this, I want to hear him say that. But within the bounds of the story and the character. But yes, that was when I did start. It became much more balanced in terms of. I always wrote dual, but I think I used to be more heavy on the female POV chapters, and it became more back and forth. So that's one thing. And then when it came to when I realized I could do duet, I lost my mind. I have one series, which is the Brody Brothers, which was literally it was completely written for audio, even though the audio didn't come out simultaneously because I couldn't work it out that way. But the whole thing was cast a year before. It was like everybody was booked a year before, and it's 3 books, 3 brothers, the parents, they were all the same in the book. It was very important to me to have the same cast so it would feel like a family in a series. And then there were 7 actors in the last 2 books, and it was a huge production. And I got actors who could sing and do accents and child voices. There were single parent romances, and it was just, I literally had a field day. Like I just went nuts, and I was very aware at that point of everyone's skill set, and a lot of like what their personalities were like, and it was so much fun. I was kind of directing in my head as I wrote, and that's the kind of thing you can do for duet. Incredibly expensive. I don't think I can do it again unless I do a Kickstarter.
I don't know. Like I am like going to have to mortgage the house for this.
Yeah, and I can't even imagine because you did a Zoom thing, right? Because my stuff was just duet editing.
For some scenes, right? Samantha,
Yeah.
I hired Lyric Audiobooks because I'm like, I don't know, I'm not like I can produce my own, but not with 4 people.
You're not going to coordinate
That's
that
a lot.
circus? No, Lyric is doing
It's a lot.
amazing. Brittany was an amazing.
Brittany's on here. Yay, Brittany, for holding down the fort.
She did all the things, and I only had to. I mostly had to do things I wanted to do. I didn't have to do anything I didn't want to do except for one thing. But she's doing all the things, you know, and dealing with me, which I always do have to do. So maybe it's.
Kayley, I was going to ask you, especially for the series where, was it a series all in duet, you said, or what, a single book? Because you said it was a series. Does that script look different than your dual narration, and how vastly different does it look from the book if people are eyeball reading it, if at all?
Those scripts were heavily prepped, and because there were so many different characters, and each character got a different. It's color coded. Mm-hmm. All the lines are highlighted.
Yeah, we all have to do that. That's
and so like for
that was the thing I didn't want to do. That I had to do.
It was you can get really great preppers, and so they will go through and I always double triple checked after the prepper went through it to make sure that they got everything right. And then there's also notes about accents, like, you know, which character has an accent, and if there's like a celebrity impression, I would put in a link for an impression. And like I had so what it looks like, I also write in the intro and outro, the credits, because I have this thing where there's like a special little surprise thing at the end credits for all my books now, and so I write that into the script. That's not in the ebook. But other than that, aside from, you know, all the highlights and everything,
pretty
the ebook and the paperback don't have that. But yes, the multicast scripts are insane, and then they also come with, you know, an Excel spreadsheet with a lot of information, and I usually write a character sheet. Last year I was I still have adrenal fatigue, so there's a lot of stuff I can't do, like literally just don't have the energy to do. So Connor produced the last book, and so Sam, I have no idea what he actually did. He told me he wrote a character sheet.
Connor is great to work with, and luckily he and I had worked together enough times so he could.
But
along the way, he was like, oh, "This is okay. Producing is a lot. Okay, I think I got all the things. Are these all the pieces you need?" It's like, "Yeah, bud, we're good. We got it."
And Christine, I know with working on Blood Bride, you did a massive amount of work to prepare all of us actors for that I imagine on top of writing the book.
I did not do. There was something that's like, I am not doing this. So I think that a lot of what you saw might have been Brittany.
So we got a lot of
stepped up.
I'm sure that's the case. And also you were writing, somebody was doing a lot of research on how to pronounce words in Napolitano versus Italian and all of that, which I imagine is different for dual from the author's end. I mean, I know obviously, like, I can speak from personal experience. Some authors are giving us some of that information. Many are not. And I'm curious, you know, obviously a duet, as we're hearing, is a massive undertaking in so many ways and requires a lot of support in a lot of directions. For dual, as you're writing the book, and if you're thinking about the production of it in audio, is that influencing sort of how you are, like, just sort of what does that process look like in terms of like comparing the two?
If I wasn't writing if I wasn't thinking about the audio, like, okay, so I write, the last few books taking place in Naples, in the Spanish Quarter of Naples, which is very dense. There is literally another language spoken. It's recognized as another language. It's based on Latin. And then, so it took me, I cannot tell you how long to find somebody. I went to Rare Florence, and that's where I met Napolitan people who could help me use Napolitan instead of Italian, which is fine. But then I wrote it down. Okay. And it's not a written language.
Yeah.
It's only spoken. So it's got like things end with, there's a vowel, the letter C, and an apostrophe. And I'm like, how am I going to tell these people how to pronounce it? And even if I told you how to pronounce it, I have readers who are eyeball reading who are like,
What
I
is
don't know how
this?
this works in my
Yeah.
head.
Yeah.
So I had to take a lot of it out, and I just put like a few like flavors of that, and then I sent YouTube videos of another dumb people talking, which was funny. So as I was writing this one, I constantly had to mark any place there was Italian, and and regular Italian, any place there was upside down, any place. I had there's tisking, a lot of tisking in Italian, and as I'm researching the different tisks, I'm realizing that it's not going to be actually helpful in audio because it's so like it sounds the same, but everything else is different, but it's not really helpful for me. So I had marked every tisk because I was going to, and I'm like, and then I had a vampire who was 500 years old who was not raised speaking what we would call now Italian. So what is his accent like? What does he sound like? He was raised speaking that whatever, not colloquial Latin, but the whatever, not the high Latin, the low Latin. Like, and if I know the real fucking difference, but
street Latin, if you will.
Street Latin.
Listen, I'm talking to my boy down here in street Latin.
So it just got really confusing for me, and then of course I sent Brittany the wrong document, so it got confusing for you because I had it all filled out. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know how to pronounce Gargiulio? It's right there. But it wasn't there because I had the wrong document. So that's all the work that you put in that you then sabotage yourself, and end up having to send it at the last minute. Anyway. Yeah, so mine has little markings all over. So there's little like squiggly lines around things that are production notes, so that Tyler can just go search for that squiggle and find out what my production notes are. And then if you guys want to like look for the square brackets, then you can just get all my narrator notes right through there.
Yeah, and having done both a duo and a duet for you, one of the things that stands out about your audio scripts as well is the voice of C.D. Reiss on the page of being like, just to be clear, like, let me give you a little bit of, specificity here. And there's not to say that I don't feel incredibly trusted by you, because that's not it. I do appreciate that sense of like, I want to be hyper specific about what we're doing here. And I think there's so much to the point about the accents and the pronunciations, your specificity is really appreciated and gives us a lot to know what we're aiming for. And
I'm also like, my Monty books, they are deeply culturally Italian, so I want to respect that.
Yeah.
Because I'm Italian also. But there was another. So like I left this note for Jason, which was like, so Carmine takes a French fry and he's like, this is shit, So Carmine, he fell asleep in like 1974. I'm not going to get into it. Woke up now, and I had to write him a note and say, look, he's not being a snob about McDonald's fries.
The best audio note you could get in a script. It's like a beautiful paragraph. What has changed in French fries?
Yeah, and it's like, I was like, you don't understand. They used to be fried in beef tallow. Right, fries, and McDonald's fries used to be like the whole thing happening in your mouth, and now they're kind of like cardboard. So he's reacting to that. So I wanted to make sure that Jason knew that he wasn't just even though he's a snob, he's the worst. But not about that. That was just the taste difference.
So it does sound like as you started putting more books for both of you, whether or not it's dual or duet, that there is a certain level of like creative excitement that comes from being able to write now specifically for voices, and that does change the text a bit, and also knowing that it's going to be done on audio, that also changes kind of the story and certain things, whether or not it's something as minor as like
I can tell you something like, for me, if I know that it's going to be dual versus duet, like I love writing text conversations. The Brody brothers being multicast has a lot of family text convos because I know you're going to hear all these different voices and everybody's going to know who's talking, and it's going to be fun. For dual, like in the Billionaires Back, I didn't do as many. When I am writing text conversations, I tend to keep them between, like for Claire, it was between her and her female best friend, more than normally I would write. There would be like a lot of sexting between the guy and the girl. And for Connor's chapters, it was a lot more. And not that you guys can't do those voices. I just feel like for in text conversations, especially, it's just they're more fun in duet. But if I'm gonna do it in dual, I want to make it sort of easier for the actors. So yeah, so like the Connor texts were like between him and a guy or an old lady or something like that, because he's really good at doing old ladies.
Really is. It really is. It really is.
I'd be writing a whole old lady.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Whole ass old lady.
No. My favorite, one of my favorite Connor performances is Ma Cannavale, which I will just give that character to you, C.D. Reiss. You can just write a Ma Cannavale character. She's actually, she married into an Italian family, but she's an Irish mammy from Boston.
That's
from Boston.
Funny.
So
Grandma, you're Irish. Come on.
Yeah. But he does that. He does it in a Boston accent. He made her sound sexy. She's like a 60-year-old mom. He somehow made her sound sexy. You're sexy. You're sexy.
I'm going to be 57 in like 5 minutes.
Hot. Hot.
It is hot. So, okay, obviously I want to be mindful of time, and clearly we could go on for so long about so many things. I love this chat so much, but I want to pivot to make sure that we just get a little bit more time for some things. We've talked a lot about some of the challenges of bringing things to audio and some of the ways it impacts, particularly with the rise of like AI. People are looking at costs and things like that. And so I think people are really maybe reconsidering their relationship to putting books in audio. But for you both who have had a lot of success, and it sounds like creative fulfillment, what are the things for you as authors that you find so the most satisfying about having your books produced in audio?
I don't even know how to articulate it. It's so much. Like, it just, for me, the first time I get the audio files back and hear the narrator reading my book, it feels like a gift to have these people literally bring these characters in this story to life. It's thrilling, and it is I do encourage people who like to eyeball read to experience it in audio too, because it absolutely elevates it, and it is a whole new experience, even if you know the story. But for me, I grew up with actors, and I really missed, that was one of the things. I didn't really miss living in LA. I missed being around actors all the time. And in this way, just working with actors is very fulfilling for me. And the actors kind of they represent your book in certain worlds in the mind of a lot of listeners, and it's very important. And that's why I'm really careful about who I choose to narrate my books.
Well, it's a very intimate relationship too, right? To C.D.'s notes in a script of, are you specifically understanding what I'm doing here? You write with Connor. Obviously, Connor has done a lot of your books, but that you found that rhythm of, you get the voice, you represent a lot of, what I'm putting out in the world. And I think those relationships are really special. Any artistic relationship, right? When you find that kind of.
Yeah. And I certainly wasn't expecting that going into it, but it's a really nice thing. And it's a great way to make friends. And you do want to trust the narrator. I mean, I trust actors to do their job. And it was so cute that Samantha, Connor told me that you asked for like certain files so that you could hear nobody's ever done that before. And I was like, dude, I hired her because I thought she was awesome, and I just wanted her to do her thing. But the fact that did you actually listen to them?
Yeah, well, because like I said, I think that rom-coms are so unique, and I really wanting to understand where somebody likes their jokes and their sense of humor to kind of sit and land.
Okay.
And
What were the files what can you say more about what that was that you asked for?
just a previous book, I was like, can you send me,
Mhm.
some chapters from another book that was another female narrator, just so I can kind of get where you guys land on this stuff, because I kind of know Connor's approach, but it's nice to hear like another female narrator doing it.
Also, if they've played the side characters, so if you've had,
Mhm.
if you're, because I always change, if it's a series of standalones, I'll change my narrators because I don't want the same narrator for each book. It's two different people, but they're side characters who appear every time, and you want them to be played in a consistent way, right?
What about for you, Christine? Like, what for you are the joys or the what's nice about having them go into audio?
First of all, I love how, people think that acting is just like you get up in the morning, you say some words, and then you go to dinner. And
yeah,
it's
that's
not,
it. Acting.
That's the whole thing.
That's it.
Right? You go in the booth and then you just read stuff. No,
wake up, fart a bit in the booth, we're done.
You guys are doing the prep.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, you, Andy aren't. Rose asked 100 questions through Brittany. Bless you. I love it. I love it when you ask questions. And it's preparation. It's things I didn't think about. There are aspects to this scene or this story or this character or this voice that I hadn't even considered. And so it adds a three-dimensionality to the work that, I'm not saying it wasn't there before, but maybe not three-dimensionality. Maybe just like, it adds to the work.
Yeah. It's, I think if it's done really well, maybe this is putting too much on audio, but I think it sort of feels like when you kind of like when Dorothy steps into Technicolor, that everything's still the same. The bones are still the same, but there's a vibrancy and there's, and it does require a lot of kind of what Kayley's talking about, of somebody, and what you're talking about, somebody who's done the prep is really genuinely trying to connect to what you specifically as an author bring differently. And I think especially for us who are working with so many different narrators or authors and so many different subgenres, that staying present and treating each project, with the care and focus that it needs, does take a bit of work. And it's always so nice when there is an author that's like, ask me the questions, I want to answer them, because that's fun for us to have that relationship.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah.
I love it when someone asks me a question, I'm like, I don't know, actually. So I'm like, I think about things that I haven't,
Okay, so I'm gonna end with a little I don't know, question. Creative. We've been talking about creativity and so many things. For you both right now, what is something that is creatively inspiring you the most?
I started watching the Eras tour on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And it just made me feel like such a happy girl, and it's just such a joy to watch like such a successful woman that we've seen grow up, just embrace everything. And I don't know, just watching it again, it comes back to like, that's just how I want to make people feel when they're experiencing my book. And so I think I'll just be listening to a lot of Taylor Swift to get through this next book.
She's an incredible poet.
She really is.
She really
she makes it seem easy, but she's done a lot. And I just, it just reminds me to get back to how I want to make people feel. And if I could somehow translate the energy of a Taylor Swift album into a book, then what a wonderful job I've done.
Yeah.
I have been, I love making shit. And so for my Kickstarter, I made so much shit. I did all the art. I did all of the graphics. I did all of the things. I learned Adobe Illustrator, because it was the only way to do what I needed to do. And I have no
You're
time to ask
doing
people.
all your graphics.
Oh
You're-
yeah, that's me. Yeah, you
Okay,
should see the cover for Blood Bride. Is like a fucking spot. I mean, my kid, the special edition is like, it's in layers, man. It's got layers. But but I can't show it. I can't show them video. But I am. You see me, right? Like, I'm so excited to do. Like, I just did the end papers yesterday, and I'm like, the end papers are just like, so making more things, and I've been blessed with this kind of extra skill that I can use to kind of get charged up.
Yeah, that the variety really speaks to me. That sometimes what actually fills my creative, well, what you both kind of talk about is that getting outside of the format that you work in to feed the well and still like creatively engage with it really speaks to me.
Yeah.
And
It's
being able
so
to,
much fun.
yeah.
It's like a whole new. Anyway,
What's your answer to that question, Samantha?
What gosh. What do I do? What's creatively inspiring me right now? This is terrible. No, I asked the questions here. You know that this is not how this works.
You broke her.
Yeah, no, you really did. I'm really bad.
I should have known better. I should have known better.
I'm getting ready to get my hands, like we're on the today is Persian New Year, which I'm celebrating, which is great, which is the beginning of spring, and I'm getting ready.
Do you have a goldfish?
Oh, well, so I've learned my lesson after many dead goldfish in my lifetime, that I have this like ceramic thing that somebody made that has like goldfish in it. So those ones can't die. But I'm getting very excited because I live like tearing stuff up, and like we live out on like 37 acres, and so it's like getting ready to be the time where I can get like shovels and sledgehammers and like work it out. And there's no wrong way to garden out here because there's just so much space, so it's like that's what's getting me juiced up and ready to go, like get my hands in the dirt. What about you, Rose?
I think for me, I'm watching Schitt's Creek for like the 5th time or something. I've watched it so many times, but it's been a while. And I'm someone who I have no space in my brain to remember details of anything, like anything I consume. So it's like new every time. But I think every time I've watched that show, I've been so floored by the specificity in the acting, in the writing, but especially in the acting. It's such a masterclass to me in, first of all, in how comedy is, when done really well, is it's often I think it's at its best when the performer is really specific in what they're doing, when they go really deep into whatever it is their zaniness their character is doing. And I don't know, just watching that show, that's what I see with every actor, and it's so inspiring to me every time. Just a reminder of, especially in the work that we do as narrators, I think, because it's so, we're telling an entire story and conveying who these people are just with our voices. Specificity is key. And so I think that's what's inspiring me at the moment.
Lovely.
Can I just say that you had the hardest job, Rose, in Blood Bride. There is a vampire who was turned at 14 just as his voice was changing. And he's 500 years old, but he's 14. And his brain is plastic like a 14-year-old's, but he's this old, and so he's got these powers, and so it's kind of a mess. He's a messy guy. And thank you for tackling that, because I knew when I was writing, I was like, oh, some narrator's going to kill me. And
yeah. Oh, I thought it was a really fun challenge. Thank you for the challenge.
Yes, thank you.
She stuck the landing. There was definitely a moment where both.
I can't wait to hear that last scene that he's in. Oh my God.
No, it's really great. And again, like I think Rose, in my creative friendship with her, loves the challenge of that specificity. And so watching her work that out and find that was like really. Oh, I do have to say the gift that you gave us, and I think the gift of these duets when we do get to do them live is being able to really watch your peers work and how they work, especially in the rise of like, we don't go to studios anymore. We're all in home studios. So like, we don't even get that. And so I think all 4 of us were like, oh, whoa, like, look at you do that and make those choices. And like, that is I'm so impressed, and I really admire you, and was really great. So for all the work and the money that these duets take, there's so many things that you can't quite put your finger on that are gained through it that are really special. So thank you for that. And thank you both for giving us your time today.
Yes.
It was fun.
Thank you all for joining us for the live recording of the Rosemore Roundtable. If you'd like to keep up with our guests, you can check out their websites, cdreiss.com and KayleeLoring.com. And from there, you'll find their social media and their books.
You'll find a big mess on my website.
It's a great mess. It's beautiful.
It's worth a visit. It's worth a visit. And thank you to our amazing guests for the great conversation, and to everyone who participated in the comments, which were quite lively. I encourage our guests to go and read them all. There's lots of love for you there. And if you missed any part of this discussion or want to go back and revisit any portion of the roundtable, it'll be up as a podcast on all platforms very soon, and it will be archived on this YouTube page. So thank you all so much.
Thanks, guys.
Mm-hmm.